Okay, welcome back. So let's get going with our very first module. In Module 1, we're going to talk about understanding profitability. 1.1, we're going to talk about getting back to the basics. See, you have to understand profit is an end result based on previous behaviors, right? What you did kind of equals money, income. So we're going to talk about some of the basic profitability concepts. And we're also going to look how it relates to your point of sale system. What I mean by that, your management software, Mitchell's, our Rowriter, All Data, whatever you're using, whatever you're printing those repair orders out, because that really is where it's going to start and kind of understanding that. Couple questions for you before we get started. Why did you become a shop owner? Why did you decide to go in business in the first place? If you're like me, odds are it was because I was really great at what I did, fixing cars. But the problem with just being great at fixing cars is you don't get rich, you really just get tired. And believe me, I know firsthand early on that was the path I took, and it didn't work out too well. The next thing, my goal and what you really want to think about is creating sustainable financial success. That's a key word. There's no hit wonders. The goal of owning a business isn't really getting rich, right? It's creating sustainable, consistent income. I have no interest in being rich for a week. Do you? Of course not. Sustainability always comes from knowing what you're doing, measuring your progress, and then change the activities, right? If you're not happy where you're at, what changes are you going to make? So let's talk about the profit side of things here for a little bit. There's really two kinds of profits. The first time when you hear profit, often we talk about gross profit, and that it comes from sales minus your cost of goods. Simply put, we only sell two things, I believe, in our business. If you want to make it really simple, what do we sell? We sell parts and we sell labor. So what did we do in sales? Minus my parts cost and my labor cost, that's going to equal gross profit. I'll give you an example of that in just a little bit. And then on the net profit side, once we know how much money we made from a gross profit perspective, the example I gave up above, now I got to pay all my bills, all my expenses, the lights, the rent, and so on. Typically, if you want to make and keep more money, you need to focus on gross profit first. And that's what we're going to talk about a little bit here. So let me ask you something. Profitability is an end result. As I said, it's a way of measuring, it's a result of your activities. So a lot of times people say, I want to make more money. But all they end up doing is working harder. And I can tell you working harder doesn't necessarily produce any more money. So profit is an end result of certain activities that we're going to talk about. The other thing I got to ask you, do you have a weekly gross profit margin goal? Or better yet, a gross profit dollar goal? Pretty important. And more importantly, do you know how to measure it? So if you're not happy where you're at, do you know how to change those results? So let's dive into a little bit on the gross profit side. So as I said before, gross profit is sales less your cost of goods. So typically, my parts cost and my labor cost. That's what I mean on cost of goods. It's usually displayed as a percentage. And remember, garbage in, garbage out, which means when we're talking about gross profit dollars and gross profit margins, everything has to be included in that cost. You can't leave labor cost out of it, and you can't leave, technician cost out of it. You can't leave parts cost out of it. So if a part didn't make it on the ticket, you're really looking at an inaccurate number. So you really got to remember garbage in, garbage out. So a couple things. Let's just say you had a sale. I'm going to use an example and just say we're doing a water pump on a car. And for easy math, we're going to price the water pump. The sale price is going to be $300. So I've got a couple cost of goods in that, remember, like we talked about. I've got my technician cost, and let's just say my technician cost is $32 an hour, and I'm going to pay the technician 2 hours. Now my technician cost is loaded, so it includes taxes and benefits. I don't want you to really get hung up on that, but understand that. So it includes what my portion of taxes, what I have to pay in payroll taxes as the business owner, and includes any benefits. So if I'm offering health insurance, whatever, you got to kind of typically put that in there. So, a rough number, that's going to be probably an additional anywhere from 17% to maybe as high as maybe 30%, depending on the benefits you offer. So remember that. This particular technician may not be paid $32 an hour. He may actually only be seeing $25, but that $7 is my load factor. That's the additional cost of doing business, cost of having that tech on there. So I want to make sure I'm looking at that number accurately. Okay, enough said about that. So I paid him 2 hours, $64 at $32 an hour, $64 loaded to put this water pump on. And I had to pay the parts store. Let's just say the water pump cost me $55. So I put a water pump on and I got my labor costs. So my sales are $300 and my cost of goods is $119, right? Do the math. So 300 minus 119 leaves me $181 gross profit. That's an important number. So the simple math and what your software does, what your point of sale does, what your business management software does, is sometimes it doesn't display that on a work order gross profit dollars, but it certainly displays it as a percentage. So if I take that gross profit of 181 and divide it by 300, it gives me a 60% gross profit margin. It's important you know that calculation. So many times we just get used to looking at it in your point of sale system, your management software, and it gives you a number, but you don't know how to change it, right? So if you're not happy with it, how do I change it? Well, in this example, there's only two ways. If I'm not happy with that 60% gross profit margin, which by the way is a good number, I can either raise the sale price, only two ways, raise the sale price, charge more than $300 for it to the customer, or I have to reduce my cost of goods. Pay the technician less to do it, or find a more cost-effective price. That's more of a sales conversation, but again, only two ways to change it. So you need to be looking at this on a work order basis, on a per work order basis, or a per repair order basis. So again, we're talking about gross profit margin here, and I can tell you that low gross profit margin is the number one problem why many shops are struggling. Think about this for a minute. The Small Business Association says 20% of businesses fail in the first year. So that's 2 out of 10. And I got to tell you, the numbers don't get any better. By the 5th year, 70% of new businesses fail. So if you made it more than 5 years, congratulations, you're in the minority. And I heard something, the number by 10 years, only 20% are still around. And that goes for some big companies too. Why do you think that is? I can tell you, it's financial incompetence. They run out of money. So what we're talking about right now, gross profit margin, is huge. It is so important. I can't tell you how many P&Ls and financial statements I look at, and I'm just blown away how I see this little simple concept here. Many shops just don't get. So what should your margins be? I believe your parts margin should be 50% or higher. We're going to talk about parts margins in just a little bit. Your labor margins should be 65% or more, right? More is better. And really, when you're talking about these things, you got to show value, right? I'm not talking about being overpriced. It's all about a value versus value proposition. And that's more, you can find out a whole lot more about that in a lot of our sales training. But you're worth it. Don't sell yourself short. I would like most shops to see overall gross profit margins at 55 to 65%. Now, a lot of times I got to tell you, when we first start working with the shop, it may be in the 40s, and they're really struggling to make a living. They're in the minority. If they keep going down that path, they're either going to be working their ass off and not making any money, or sooner or later, it's going to catch up with them and they're going to run out of money. So it's really, really important. These should be your expectations. You need to know where you're at, and again, share these goals with everybody on the team. I mentioned before, garbage in, garbage out, and that's where the accuracy comes in, right? A speedometer. I went old school there for the picture on that speedometer, but again, if you've got a speedometer that's 15 miles off, there's no sense in even looking at the speedometer. So again, we need to make sure that we have accurate measurements. One of the biggest things I see is labor cost, right? So labor cost is sometimes not calculated correctly. I'm going to give you a couple of examples of that and things to check coming up here in just a couple of minutes. And parts omissions. I mean, people not putting parts, a service advisor not putting the correct parts on an invoice. So maybe you're doing the brake job and it needs a hardware kit, and man, I've already quoted the customer a price and I don't want to put it on the ticket. Well, listen, even if you're not charging the customer in it, I told you garbage in, garbage off, or garbage out, garbage in, garbage out. For this speedometer to be accurate, I still better put that cost in there, even if I'm not going to charge the customer. So I may need to price that hardware kit, and the cost is $10 and the price is $0, but now when I'm calculating my margins, it's correct. So let's talk about technician cost for a moment. This is one of the things that I always see. So I got a couple screenshots here of Mitchell's, and I'll blow that up for you here, but I want to make sure that you're checking your technician cost and it's calculated properly. So in Mitchell's, and all programs are pretty much the same, you'd have to find it, if not call your software company, but under the configurations menu, if I bring up a technician, it shows me what his wage is. And in this example, this technician wage is $32.50 loaded. How can I check it to make sure? It's never going to be an exact science, but as at the end of the week or at the end of the pay period, if you pay your technician, say, at the end of the month, whatever it may be, go ahead and pull that report out of your software, that sales summary. This is a business summary report out of Mitchell's. And Mitchell's, again, remember that basic sales minus cost of goods equals gross profit dollars. This report doesn't actually show my cost, but you can see what Mitchell's does in their business summary. They show their sales, 40,232 if you take a look at where the arrows are drawn, and they show their profit. So I have to do a little math. I have to take 40,232 minus that 26,868, and it gives me 13,363.41. Compare that to what my payroll report said. And that way you might have to tweak this, that your technician cost up or down a little bit. It's never going to be an exact. If I'm within a couple of points, good. I suggest you look at this at least quarterly and play with that number to make sure that you get it right. Okay? So, points we're talking about here, it's got to be consistent, right? It starts at the repair order. So I want you to make sure you're looking at gross profit margins on the repair order. Then it goes from there to your point of sale report, right? That business summary or whatever it may be. And then we should be able to see the same thing on our income statement, which we'll get deeper into the income statement when we talk about the financial report cards. So what do I mean, right? Hey, when I'm looking at it on a repair order basis, again, just a quick snapshot of a Mitchell screenshot, but again, most software is about the same. You can see, man, I got 65%. It shows me what my profit dollars is, what my 65% gross profit margin is. That should, again, everything in there, no garbage in, garbage out. Everything's got to be in there. It'll transfer over at the end of the week if it's accurate. So it says I got 59.65 gross profit margin. Great job. I want to make sure it's accurate. Want to follow that speedometer that's accurate. And if I took a look at my P&L, and this is just an example P&L, but again, if I took at my look at my P&L, it should kind of match. So if you're not happy with your P&L, everybody just kind of jumps to that bottom line there to take a look at net income. If you're not happy with what's on your P&L, I told you before, it's the activities in your business. How am I pricing that? How am I pricing my parts? How am I pricing my labor? The biggest sin I see is parts pricing. It's huge. So again, you're free to price your parts wherever you want. Don't determine this as price fixing. But this is a couple questions for you. How do you price your parts? Do you go off a retail? Sometimes years ago, I've been in this business a long time, they would say, oh, I jobber plus 30% or whatever. I don't know what the heck that means. But if you're using retail or list price, what's happening, you're allowing the vendor or the manufacturer to set your price. Bad idea. I use cost up pricing. So we have a parts matrix, right? And we stick to the matrix. So I'm going to show you just an example price matrix. Again, this is where you need to kind of set your own pricing. This can be found on our website as well, on the members site. But my goal, as I said before, was to price the parts at 50%. Well, let's think about a 50% margin. Everybody says, sometimes I talk to a shop owner and they say, oh, I double the cost, right? That would be 50%. A 50% margin would be taking whatever your cost is and doubling it. That's a 50% margin. Do you really, right? You might do it with a set of brake pads or a brake rotor, but do you do that with that $1,300 catalytic converter that you had to buy at the dealer? Of course not. That's why you need a matrix. So you can see in the matrix, in this particular matrix here, if I paid $5 for a part, maybe it was a bracket or something like that, the proper matrix is I can sell that $5 part for over $15. Multiply it times 3.35 to give you that 70% retail price. But as you can see, when I get higher up and I have to buy that $1,000 converter, I'm only marking it up times 1.55, or about a 35% markup. And at the end of the period, I end up with about that 50% parts matrix. So sure, there are exceptions to the rules. I have to be careful. Tires certainly don't follow this rule. Batteries certainly don't follow this rule. But pretty much most other things do. So make a list of your exceptions. One of the exceptions typically we see people say is dealer parts. And I kind of disagree with that. When I buy a part from a dealer, it's no longer the dealer's part. It's my part. And I back it up. My warranty is typically 3 years, 36,000 miles. My minimum warranty on any of the services that we do. So my goodness, if you bought a part from a dealer, say that water pump, I'm pretty sure it's going to last 3 years, 36,000 miles. And if you think about the dealer, 12-month, 12,000 miles. And what would happen if that part went bad, at the dealer and it was 1 month out of warranty? I can tell you that customer's pretty much SOL, right? So again, believe in your prices. But again, we talked a little bit about the basics in this modules, and I think that it all starts there. So share this with your employees, share this with your service advisor, especially because, again, it's a result of behavior. So thanks for watching this module. I look forward to seeing you on the other upcoming modules. Thanks so much.